Hare Nitai Gaura Premanande.
I was chanting in the temple room, going back and forth, and he walked up to me and he said, "So, Bhakta Pat, what's your plan?" I said, "Well, Prabhu, decided I'm going to be traveling to India." He said, "Really? For what?" And I said, "I've got to find a guru." He said, "Why do you think you have to go to India for that?" I said, "Well, I don't think there's too many gurus around here in Detroit." And I pulled out my Isha and I showed him exactly where Prabhupada said this. And he said, "Oh, come here." And he grabs me by the hand. And he literally holds my hand and walks me over to the Vyasa-san of Srila Prabhupada with the picture of Prabhupada. And up till this point in time, and I cannot explain why this is so, but I never really took note of the Vyasa-san or Prabhupada's picture on the Vyasa-san. I've been coming to the temple for a couple of weeks. It was just one of the pictures in the temple, okay? And then he said, "This is your guru. He's actually everyone's guru. You don't have to go to India to find a guru. He's here." And at that moment, I looked at Prabhupada's picture, and then it was like, whoosh, the curtain was pulled back, and now Srila Prabhupada pervaded everything. I couldn't look at anything in the temple the same way. I couldn't look at anything about the devotees the same way. Everything was pervaded with this connection to Srila Prabhupada. And so then it was just a matter of time before I finally just said, "Okay, that's it. I want to give this a try," is what I basically said. And so I moved into the center with the devotees there in Detroit, 8311 East Jefferson, and began to mine all of the different devotees that had any experience with Srila Prabhupada. On that walk, Srila Prabhupada talked about a few different things, one of them being who actually started book distribution in a big way in America. It was just a sort of random discussion that was born out of something else, you know. And so Srila Prabhupada, different people were saying different things. People said Keshava, Buddhimanta, Karandar, they were offering different things, right? And Prabhupada stopped and he went, no, Jayananda. Jayananda, he began. So Jayananda happened to be on that walk, and he was in the back. And Prabhupada waited for him to come forward. Prabhupada said, "Jayananda." And Jayananda immediately comes up, "Yes, Prabhupada." And it was classic Jayananda Prabhupada. Jayananda, real tall, looking down into Prabhupada's eyes, loving, you know, relationship. And he goes, "It was you, wasn't it? You bought the first printing of teachings of Lord Chaitanya. $5,000. And Prabhupada looked at him, "Yes, he did." And then Jayananda went, "I don't know, Srila Prabhupada. Like, I don't know if that was the first, you know." And Prabhupada said, "No, yes, that was the first." And he was, you know, confirming for everyone around. So, and I was just watching this like everyone else would do, you know, and it was blissful. But as Prabhupada began to walk again, I was trying to hear him a little better, you know, and I was off in the back and the side a little bit. So I began to kind of weave like a race car driver, you know, as carefully as I could, weave a little bit, get in a little closer, get a little closer. Finally, I was directly behind Prabhupada, but off to the left and a little bit back. And I was keeping track of Prabhupada's feet and so on like that. He had a kind of rhythm with his cane. And I was walking, and then suddenly Prabhupada stopped with a no notice. He didn't even slow down, he just stopped. And I accidentally stepped into the heel of his foot. Not hard, you know, just enough that he noticed I was there. And he turned around. This is the first thing that happened. I don't know if you remember this, but he turned around and he put his cane right in my stomach. And he looks and he goes, "Don't come close." And I was, mortified, shocked. The rest of the walk, Hridai Nanda Maharaj kept looking at me and kind of signaling, get back, get back. And I was real nervous at that point to proceed any further. But when I came back from the walk, Rameshwar said to me, what happened on the walk? What did you hear? I said, "Prabhupada, talk to me." I mean, that was enough. Yeah, actually, and he said, "What did he say?" And I said, "Don't come close." Yet, over the years, something as simple as "don't come close" has replayed itself in my head a zillion times. And each time, it means something a little bit different. Don't take the spiritual master for granted. Never minimize the spiritual master. Don't think that coming close physically is coming close. Et cetera, et cetera. These kinds of things, right? And this is the way I think most devotees, we have the facsimile of that in the material world where, whether it's relationships between parents and children or men and women or events in your life or work or whatever, that there's like this pivotal, tiny little fragment of a moment that remains tagged by that experience or tagged to that experience, and we carry that. So it's exactly the same way in Srila Prabhupada's, we like to think that they were intentional, but really they're all part of a grand play that Krishna is orchestrating. So, that particular experience was kind of set the tone for the rest of my experience with Srila Prabhupada, which was, even when I would ask him a question, he would generally turn to Tamal or someone else and say, "What is that? What is he asking?" Like I couldn't even come close enough that I could ask Prabhupada a question and he would really get it, And then they would explain the question and Prabhupada would turn back to me and answer the question, So my relationship with Srila Prabhupada was always, for the most part, it was through intermediaries. So, in Chicago, Prabhupada said from the Vyasa-san, he told the story of Vishvamitra Muni and how he had performed penances and austerities for 60,000 of years. And then, unfortunately, Prabhupada said he fell down in the association of Menaka. So Prabhupada said then he gave birth to Apsara, and then he again went back, and again he performed 60,000 of years of penance and austerities, and then again his penance was given up. So Prabhupada said, so this is a very difficult process. He said, but for us, the results attained by Vishvamitra Muni, by 60,000 of years, you always put an S on the end, 60,000 of years performing this tapasya, penance, Prabhupada said, the devotee achieves by the performance of Sankirtan. And he paused. He said, it was like, the devotee achieves by the performance of Sankirtan, and Prabhupada looked at him, in a few days only. And the temple room, literally, it felt like the roof was going to be blown off. 200 devotees, and the reaction to that statement was so instantaneous, okay? And so joyous. It was almost like someone saying, normally it would take $1 million to get into this building or to get this car, but for the next 20 seconds, anyone in this room can have it for $1 only. you know. And everybody, what? They'd go crazy, right? So Prabhupada was saying, by performance of Sankirtan in a few days only, right? And the devotees just, and Prabhupada realized how much he had satisfied everyone. And he had this smile on his face that was just amazing. And he was so happy to have made the devotees so happy. When Prabhupada arrived in Hawaii, he came down this escalator that was isolated in the airport. It was strange. It was like right in the middle of a very open space. It just came straight down the middle. So it was almost like a stage entrance. And when Prabhupada came, all the devotees were chanting and doing kirtan and everything. And Prabhupada already had like 6 garlands on as he was coming down the steps. And when he got down further, when he stepped off, he had 2 or 3 more. And it was beautiful, you know, this Hawaiian leis, you know. And then one lady walked up out of nowhere that we didn't know. One of the boys that were there recognized her. But she stepped forward and she said, Swamiji, may I offer you a garland? And Srila Prabhupada looked at her and his smile was so, it was like a child. And he said, why, yes. And then she started to reach, and then Prabhupada said, wait. And he takes off one garland, puts it on a devotee, takes off another garland, puts it on a devotee, takes off another garland, puts it on a devotee. And then Prabhupada said, all right. And he leans forward like this. And as the woman puts the flower garlands on Prabhupada, she bows her head like this, right? And Prabhupada touched her. Just touched her head. I mean, you know, when you see somebody's eyes just burst into tears, right? And Prabhupada looked at her, he got a smile on his face, he says, that's all right. Like that. And the devotees were, you know, just beside themselves chanting. I met a policeman in Port of Authority in I think it was 77. It was in 77. It was just a little bit after the Rath Yatra. And the policeman said that he had worked on the detail for the 76 Rath Yatra. And he said, I knew that your Swami, no, I think he actually said Guru, was special. And we said, why? And he said, because, you know, normally in New York, when there's a celebrity of some kind, or politician or whatever, it's really difficult to hold the crowds back. And everybody's getting up there, and, you know, we have to have a lot of cops, and we have to push everybody back. And he said, but he got out of that car to get on your parade. And he said, there had to be 1,000 of you kids running around there. And then he got out of the car and just stood up, and he didn't even seem to notice. And he just started walking towards the cart, and everybody just parted. Just stepped back. He said it was like Moses parting the Red Sea. And he said, and he never even appeared to notice that this could have been problematic. I sold Bhagavad Gitas to 2 soldiers, separate events, in the airport as we were waiting for Srila Prabhupada to arrive for the Rath Yatra in San Francisco. And after he gave me $20 for a Bhagavad Gita, I said, you know, the author to this book is arriving right now. And if you like, I can take him. You can greet him. We're all greeting him. Would you like to do that? And the guy said, of course, let's go. So we run over. We have to run quite a distance to get to the gate. And as we're running, he's getting more and more and more excited. And he's seeing all these devotees running. Devotee women in saris, men, devotees carrying mridangas, you know. And he's getting more and more excited. And as he's running along, he pulls out his wallet and he goes, here. He takes out another $50 and he gives it to me as we're running. He goes, I didn't give you enough. And I go, okay. And I take it, you know. And we rush up, and just as we get to the gate, it's almost time for Srila Prabhupada to come through. So he's looking over everybody, he's trying to see, and then he jumps up on one of the chairs. And he looks down over everybody's head, and he can look right where Prabhupada's coming through the gate. And he sees Prabhupada's head. He sees the top of Prabhupada's head. And he goes crazy. And he starts yelling. And then I rush over and I grab his hat because I didn't want to get the step on. I grab his hat and I bring it back to him. And he is like a child. He's a soldier in uniform, carrying a big green rucksack. And he sees Srila Prabhupada, and he gets swept up in this intoxication of momentary association with Srila Prabhupada. And after Prabhupada walked by us and went out, into the car, he was beside him. Did you see that? Did you see what happened? Did you see? That was incredible. That was amazing. Totally excited. 2 years later, Washington, D.C., I do the same thing, meet a boy half hour before Prabhupada arrives. I'm in the airport distributing books, and I give him a Bhagavad Gita, and I tell him, hey, the author of this book is arriving. How would you like to greet him? Right? And he goes, are you serious? And I go, yeah. And he goes, where? And I go, come on, let's go. We rush over to the TWA wing of the airport. And by this time, all the devotees had kind of set up two lines, right, for Prabhupada to come through, and they had thrown flowers, and the airport was a little upset because they had made a little bit of a mess with the flowers, but devotees. So anyway, Prabhupada comes through the finger, this big cavernous, okay, and the TWA building in the DC airport was quite cavernous too, so the kirtan was really loud and resonant. And Prabhupada's walking, and he just looks, and you got this kind of bright, lightly timed Prabhupada, and it was almost like Prabhupada was like a shadow, there was about 4 people or 5 people in that party walking through the finger. Prabhupada's, coming. And I point him out, I said, there he is, he's right there. You see him? And I turn the book over and see his picture. I said, there he is, he's right there. And I said, oh my God. And he's holding on my arm. Okay? And he's like, oh my God, you're right. That's it. That's him. He's there. Oh my God. And then Prabhupada comes through, and he takes the Bhagavad Gita, and he holds it up like this. And he goes, sir. He's trying to get Prabhupada's attention. He goes, sir. Prabhupada stops right in front of him. He goes, I got your book. And Prabhupada looks at me and says, thank you very much. And then he turns and he walks. And the guy looks at me, again, he goes, can you believe that? He talked to me. Did you see that? He talked to me, And I'm like, yeah, you can't believe what just happened to you. You have no idea what just happened to you. Srila Prabhupada, he just was so confident. And so I was on a walk when one Indian gentleman was talking about Gandhi. And he said he was glorifying Gandhi's peace movement, right? And Prabhupada said, Gandhi's peace movement was nonsense. No, it was nonsense. And the man was shocked. And Prabhupada said, you cannot put an end to war in this material world. War is a feature of this material world. Everyone is here competing to be Krishna. Oh, where's the question of peace? No, you cannot have peace here. So when he said it, it was with such, it's like a thud, like dropping an anvil, on somebody, like boom. And it doesn't even bounce, it just goes boom, like that. Another time I was on a walk with Srila Prabhupada when he actually, he stopped. The moon was in the sky, the sun was in the sky. Prabhupada stopped and he looked at him, and he put his hands on his cane like this, 2 hands on the top of the cane. So it is my conclusion that the moon is cool flame. And he looks around at everybody. And he said, yes, it must be flame. Otherwise, wherefrom comes the illumination? And he said, but it must be cool flame. And this is the most amazing part of this. He said, it must be cool flame. Otherwise, why wouldn't our Tamananda have sung Koti Chandra Shushitala? That Lord Nityananda's lotus feet are more soothing and cooling than 1,000 moons. So he's operating from the position that he's using his reasoning, his logic. The syllogism starts with Narottam Das Ananda has sung and affirmed that Lord Nityananda's lotus feet are more soothing than thousands of moons. That's the first term in his logical establishment. That's pretty amazing. And he said it as if it was just simply an axiomatic fact. So that kicked off a whole discussion about the moon and things that he had said about the moon and written about the moon and so on, right? And he became very, very playful with the devotees. He would, so you've been to the moon? You've been lately? Yeah. How about you, Jayadvaita Maharaj? You've been? No, Srila Prabhupada. Huh? You've been? No. So how you know? What do you know of the moon? You only know what they tell you. So this is our point. We accept Krishna's verdict on everything. They can accept whatever. We accept Krishna's verdict. So Prabhupada was just using the subject matter to poke holes in our faith in the material scientists and so on, you know, and show us that really they don't know. They say they know this or that, but if they've not gone, they don't know. They're just accepting what somebody else has said. So this was a very important point, and at our tender age at that time, we didn't really understand it. If you think back, we didn't discuss things like the ontology of Krishna consciousness, you know, and it was explained to us in a very direct and straightforward manner by Srila Prabhupada that the only way you can know the absolute truth is if you accept the Vedic version. Otherwise, you can't know anything, one way or the other. So the only way you can know is have faith in the Vedas and then apply that and have that revealed. I remember in Chicago, one couple was introduced to Prabhupada, and he asked the husband, so you're reading our books? It was in a darshan. So you're reading our books? And he said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I've completed the Bhagavad Gita, I read the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and I'm now reading the Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada said, oh, that's very good. And the wife was sitting to the side and a little behind him. And Prabhupada looked at her for a second and he said, so you are also reading? And she went, well, Srila Prabhupada, actually, I love the chanting, but I don't really like the philosophy so much. And Prabhupada said, that's all right. And then she went, oh, but I do read the Krishna book. And Prabhupada said, oh, that's perfect. Everything is there. And then he waited a second, he said, I also read Krishna book. And the whole room just, you know, just got ecstatic when Prabhupada said that, and also looked at the woman with a sort of encouragement, you know? Like everyone was looking, you know, hey, that's fantastic, you know? And she looked around for, like, everyone's kind of, you know, reaction like that. But the Prabhupada was so kind, he said, anyway, that's all right. And then when she said, oh, I do like the Krishna book, Prabhupada said, I read it too. Vrindavan in 1975 or 76. We were walking down the road. There were some events that led up to this, but we're walking down the road and Prabhupada looks and sees a pig get out of the water and run off. And Prabhupada started laughing. And he said, in New York, you have seen that library on, I think, 42nd Street, New York Public Library. Very big. Prabhupada said, so many books, thousands and thousands of books, Prabhupada said, all about sex. It's kind of funny how Prabhupada would sometimes exaggerate things for effect. And it was brilliant comedy, in a sense. Yeah. Thousands and thousands of books, all about sex. How to make sex, how to study sex, the psychology of sex, how to have better sex. I was Dr. Freud, philosophy. Probably said, but this hog, he has not read any books, but he can have sex with his mother, with his daughter, with his sister. Oh yes, he can do. And Howard said, that he can make sex better than you. And he has not read any book. So if you want good sex, you come back as a hog. And he, it was just like a moment of just punching, Another time he was walking down the road in Vrindavan, and he saw a camel off in the distance chewing on thorny trees, just like we read about in the Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada looked up, and prior to that, he had been very kind of growly. He was disturbed by some of the things that he considered to have not been yet managed correctly in the build-up to the opening of the Vrindavan temple. So he was pointing these things out, to the different people like Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Dayananda and so on. So I won't go into the details of that, but he was kind of growly, and then he looked up and saw this camel, and immediately he started chuckling. He said, just see, just like our grihastas. And Sri Govinda Prabhu was walking next to Prabhupada, and he said, Srila Prabhupada, remember how Sri Govinda used to wear that white cheddar over his head, and just his kind of beak would kind of point out, he's like, had an unusual appearance. And he said, don't you mean the Grihamatis, Srila Prabhupada? And Prabhupada looked, and he's walking with his cane, he goes, you are talking Grihamatis, I am talking Grihastas. So then he stops, and he says, isn't it so much difficulty, so much labor, like the camel? He chews the thorns, he's eating his own blood. Prabhupada said, there's so much labor, so much effort, so much work to have a child. And the wife has to suffer so much. Then labor, then the child comes, so much pain. And then Prabhupada said, and then the man, he has to work so hard, 20-year sentence. And then Prabhupada says, and 1 year later, the wife says, I want another. And Prabhupada said, this is Maya. And then from that, a whole conversation ensued about, well, some men have to get married. Otherwise, you say that all the women should be married, Prabhupada. Yes, that is best. But then some men are going to have to marry. Prabhupada, yes. And then he turned and he stopped and he looked right at Sri Govinda and he put his finger up and he said, but when you marry, you must understand you are doing so under the influence of the modes of material nature. With the idea being that it's passion, not compassion, that brings us to this point. And then he said, you understand? And Sri Govinda said, he stared right at Prabhupada like terrified, And he said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada turned and he walked. And as we walked by the camel, Prabhupada just laughed. He just chuckled. So, it was almost like the Bhagavatam coming to life, The verse in the Bhagavatam. Primarily, whenever we got a chance to be with Srila Prabhupada, we were introduced to him, not just myself as an individual, but groups of men, as his Sankirtan devotees. And he always, generally speaking, would express something like, thank you very much. And my Guru Maharaj thanks you very much. You know why he said that? It's not only do I thank you, but my Guru Maharaj thanks you very much. And he also said in Hawaii, he said, if you dedicate your whole life to distributing these books, and I promise you, you will go back to home, back to God. He would say this. And it was like a loving father telling us, giving us a secret. Like this is like a secret. Just do this. And he would always, temple to temple, wherever I saw him in the temples that he would go, he would always say something along the lines of, this is like, I see this is, I've been to many temples, but this temple, I think this is the best, you know. Wherever he went, he would say something along those lines, and he really knew how to reach into the devotees' hearts and sort of take possession of their heart. When he went to the Baltimore temple, for example, from D.C., he did it in such a dramatic fashion. He was in his room in Washington, and someone brought in a picture of the deities from Baltimore. And Prabhupada looked at it and he said, "Where are these deities?" And they said, "They're in Baltimore, Srila Prabhupada." And Prabhupada said, "Baltimore? Baltimore's not far from here." And they said, "No, Prabhupada, it's about an hour away at the most." And Prabhupada said, "Prepare the car, we'll go immediately." And just pushed the table in front of him, stood up and like, "Let's go." And the whole temple, every devotee that was in Washington got in their own cars and vans and everything and streamlined up to Baltimore, and they drove a little slower so that everybody could get there before Prabhupada, so that when Prabhupada got there, the 150 devotees that were in D.C. were now in Baltimore, greeting Prabhupada in Baltimore. And then Prabhupada came in, and he offered obeisances to the Gaura deities there, and the kirtan was going, and Prabhupada was dancing in front of the deities with his arms raised, and then he went and he sat down on the Vyasana. Kirtan went for a little while. And then Prabhupada began by saying, "So you are all very, very fortunate here in Baltimore." He said, "This is a very, very beautiful temple." And he said, "You're very fortunate here that you simply come every day before their lordships and you chant, 'Jai Nitai Gaura, Jai Sachinanda,' and you will all go back to home, back to God." Very simple, right? And of course, 100 devotees. Remember that Baltimore temple, how small it was? The room was no bigger than this, practically. And 100 devotees were squeezed in there as if that was their temple. And when Prabhupada said that, everyone just, their hearts burst open and they all cried out, "Jai Prabhupada." And that was the other element that was always there, was the devotees were always saturated with a sense of gratitude to Prabhupada and to Krishna for letting them be in that moment, letting them be there when that happened, whatever it was. Like when Prabhupada went into ecstasy in 75 in Mayapur. And he was speaking. I can't remember the whole class. But at one point he said, "You're all, you should pray to Krishna for long life. You are all young men." And he had his eyes closed. He said, "Not like me, I'm old." And when he said that, he was stunned. What happened, no one can know. But he said that, and Krishna said, "No, you're not." I'm sure that something like that happened. And Prabhupada was totally internal. Were you there when that happened? Yeah, and the temple room, no one could breathe, right? No one could breathe. Everyone just... And then Prabhupada finally, Trivikram Swami went, "Jai Srila Prabhupada." It had to be like 2-3 minutes. And he went, "Jai Srila Prabhupada," very softly. And then another 60 seconds later, Prabhupada kind of moved a little bit, and Hansa Duda started singing Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya. And Prabhupada eventually, he moved his head like this, and then he reached down, and without opening his eyes, he grabbed his kartals. Kind of moved his hand, grabbed his kartals, and then opened his eyes and started singing. And everybody that was in that moment, everyone experienced that, realized that they had actually experienced something extraordinary. And for the rest of the day, you could go anywhere in Mayapur and everybody was thinking about that and talking about it. And, "Did you see that happen? That was amazing." You know, Prabhupada was making everyone feel very fortunate, you know, to have those opportunities and those moments. In Chicago, Prabhupada was giving an example on the walk that how the materialistic society is determined to essentially take everything that Krishna has given them in this material world, the material energy, and instead of using it for service to Krishna and therefore for the good of themselves and everyone else, they're using it ultimately, trying to steal it and keep it for themselves, and therefore they're misusing it like a knife. It can be used to cut vegetables or it can be used to cut your throat. And so I said, well, Srila Prabhupada, if we were more pure, could we convince them to stop cutting? Would we be better at convincing them to stop cutting their throat? And Srila Prabhupada said, no, what you're preaching is perfect and pure. He said, they're all envious. They're like snakes. Very envious like serpents. He said, but you know what is a snake charmer? Have you seen the snake charmer? And he said, so you have to become like that. You have to learn how to charm them, to bring them back to Krishna. So I always took that as a kind of general instruction, but also a direct instruction to me. In Washington, I did tell Prabhupada a lot about the events of Sankirtan that day and in general. I told Srila Prabhupada that one soldier had told me that he and a group of his men in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, used to meet regularly and read his Bhagavad Gita together. And that boy I met just that day that I was with Prabhupada that night. So, unusual. And I met another soldier that day who I gave him 4 books and he gave me $80. When I told Srila Prabhupada that I gave one boy 4 books and he gave me $80, Prabhupada looked at me and his eyes got big and he went, 4 books, $80? That is a handsome profit. And when I told him about the boy in Fort Jackson, Prabhupada was surprised. And I said, and they regularly meet together, Srila Prabhupada, read the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada went, Acha, our Bhagavad Gita? Like, and I said, your Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada looks over and he goes, just see, like, it started, the encroachment of Krishna is progressing. He also told me in Washington when I was introduced to him, Hari Sari said, Prabhupada, Pragosh was trying to learn how to sell your books like full sets, like an encyclopedia. And he recently worked with one company, and Prabhupada he was listening to it, and he's actually over there, and he's looking over here, and he went, so how did that go? And I said, well, Srila Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and I had attempted this, but it was pretty clear that the BBT didn't have all the full sets in stock like this. And also, generally speaking, the common man is not going to be able to buy this many books at one time. And so then he said, so what are you doing now? And I said, well, I went right back to the airport, Srila Prabhupada, and I'm doing books in the airports like I was for the last few years. And Prabhupada looked at me for a second, and he kind of smiled, and I said, yes. Whatever increases book distribution, we accept. Whatever decreases it, we reject. Just like that, he took his hand and went, we reject. So there was a simple statement, and I took it as a sort of a very specific instruction, which I look back on my life and I realized I've made many decisions that really didn't increase my book distribution, And then you go back. Another thing that Prabhupada said in that particular time was he asked about prasadam distribution in New York. And he said, so they're selling prasadam in New York City on the street? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. He said, what are they selling? And I said, I don't know, Srila Prabhupada, I'm not sure. Then he looks at me and he goes, kachoris? They're selling kachoris? And his eyes got big. And I said, I don't know, Srila Prabhupada, if they're selling kachoris. And Prabhupada said, oh, they must. They must. First class kachoris, cooked in ghee. then then the meat eaters will lose their taste for meat, naturally. It was a sort of a, we all heard about Srila Prabhupada as Kachori Mukha as a child, liking kachoris, and that was the only thing he asked about. When I said that they were selling prasadam, he said, kachoris? They must, well they must, It was childlike. Then he asked me, are you coming to Rath Yatra? No, first he said, do you stay here in Washington? I said, no, Srila Prabhupada, I'm living in New York. And then he said, oh, I began in New York. Again, very childlike, And he said, so you're coming to Rath Yatra? And I said, I wouldn't miss it for anything, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, yes, Rath Yatra in New York City. It has always been my dream. He said, America is the most important country in the world. And New York, the most important city in America. And Fifth Avenue is the most important street in New York. It's like that. And it was just a very warm and friendly kind of revelation, He was just basically talking about himself as a person, as a child. It was very personal. So when I told Srila Prabhupada that this soldier had given me $80 and took 4 books, he had also asked me, could he be Krishna conscious and still be a soldier? And Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, so how did you answer? And I said, I told him, Srila Prabhupada, that the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to the greatest warrior in human history. Which it was kind of Prabhupada was charmed by that because he looked over at Harisari like, this guy really knows how to lay it on. So then he looks back at me and he waits for a second. He takes a couple steps, and then he looks back at me and he goes, you have answered rightly. Arjuna was a military man. Just like that. He was just enlivened by, the simple frankness of it. And he confirmed it. We were in Chicago. Somebody said to Prabhupada, sometimes they're taking the books, they're tearing them up, they're throwing them in the trash. His immediate retort. He stops, he turns, he says, they're throwing their babies in the trash. What can be done? What can be done? We cannot prevent that. Prabhupada said, but even they touch the book before they throw it in the trash, it makes some benefit. Immediately we're like, well, there's no problem there, If we would get attacked by anybody physically, we literally thought, you're trespassing. We own the airport. And we're letting you use it. You understand? Now that's, of course, to anyone in material consciousness, they would think that's outrageous or very cultish or whatever, But quite literally, that was our inner sense of what was happening. We would go into malls. The first airports I distributed, besides when I worked with Tripura a little bit in LA, and I did Chicago for a little while. Then I went up to Minnesota. But the first airport I worked was actually Hawaii, and it was illegal. So for 4 months, I worked that airport every day, and I used to run from the cops, dodge the security cops. They were actually Hawaii cops. But one day, the cop arrested me and took me in the office. And he threw me up against the wall. He was very, very thuggish. Not too professional. Big guy. So he pushes me up against the wall. And he grabs my shirt. And he goes, now listen, I'm not going to tell you again. Don't come back here. Don't come back. I'll have you arrested. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not going to tell you again. I'm coming back every day. And he looked at me and he was completely flummoxed. He said, do you want me to arrest you? I said, you can arrest me. I'm single. He said, you're single? I said, I'm single. I don't have a wife. I don't have any kids. You can arrest me. I can sit in jail for a few days. No big deal. And he started laughing. He said, you don't care. I said, no, I don't care at all. I said, but as soon as I get out, I'm going to come back here. I said, I give out 40, 50 of these books every day, mostly to service guys. They need these books. They need these books. These books are very important. So then the guy lets go of him and he backs up. And I start preaching to him. And in my mind, I just prayed to Prabhupada. I said, Prabhupada, give me the right thing to say. I said, you know, you follow me around so much. You kind of catch me all the time. I said, you're thinking about me all the time. And then he's like embarrassed, right? I said, I think you should read one of these books. I think that's why you're following me. Krishna wants you to follow me. I said, take this book home, read it. If you really feel that there's nothing of value in this book, then okay. But I said, I think you'll find something of value. So the next day, I had one of the devotee women make me a cheesecake at the temple. And I took it to the airport. And I hunted for him. I didn't wait for him to catch me. I hunted for him. And gave him the cheesecake. And he looked at me and said, all right, okay, all right. I read your book, a little bit of your book. I read enough. You're okay. He said, but I got a boss. And he's going to get on my case if I don't get on your case. So he said, so you do me a favor. When you see me walking, you sit down. Don't talk to people. Let me walk through, walk away, go in the other airport, other wing, and then you go back to what you're doing. Is that okay? I said, we got a deal. And I shook his hand. And we had that kind of authority. We felt that we had this authority because Prabhupada was absolutely cracking the whip. He was cracking the whip in the most loving, wonderful way. That we were, it was impossible to say no to Prabhupada. Because he was literally like the king and the general. The book distributors especially, we saw him in that generalship, kingly way, probably more so than maybe others, because that was the relationship that we had. And in Chicago, there were so many different situations where we got arrested in Chicago, we got arrested in Denver, we got arrested in Hawaii, both on book distribution and Harinam. In New York, we used to get chased constantly by the cops in LaGuardia Airport, till finally we kind of struck a deal with them. They gave us an area to work. And I used to bring the cop, every Friday I used to bring him a cheesecake. And when I failed to bring him a cheesecake, he would come out and look for me. And he would get upset. He would say, hey, where's my cheesecake? And I know, because I met devotees from, when I went to Mayapur in 75 and 76, I met devotees, men, brahmacharis from Australia, from England, from Germany, from Sweden, and from other places, but, France. And they were all cut out of the same wood. And they all had stories of, you know, how hard they were pushing to distribute those books. Truthfully, we were pushing much more than we pushed since. And we didn't care. And a lot of devotees will look back now and say, that was wrong to do, or that really yielded the wrong result, or didn't make any friends, or whatever, right? But the fact of the matter is, if you look at this country today, we need to start pushing again. We need to start making waves, getting some feedback. The way Bud and I pass out books at Rockefeller, that's one thing. That's We're gifting people the books, and there's not going to be anything negative. But imagine if we had 1,000 men in America again, ready to be brahmachari for 5 years, and ready to go into every possible situation and distribute Bhagavad Gita. And we have 40 years of experience now translating for people this message that Prabhupada gave us, which is simultaneously beautiful, all-knowing, thrilling, attractive, and problematic, or problem-solving. It's everything, right? And we have much more knowledge of this now than we had then. But the thing was, at that particular time, Srila Prabhupada was, he made it clear. When he came to Chicago, and the reporter walked up to the window and stuck the microphone in his face and said, "Swamiji, why have you come to Chicago?" Without skipping a beat, Prabhupada picked up the Time magazine. On the cover it said, "Crime, why and what to do." And Prabhupada picked up the magazine and said, "Why? Because you have a very big problem here in Chicago. Too much crime. Here it says crime, why and what to do. I have come to show you why and what to do." And all the devotees who were around the car, they just like, if his Prabhupada was, Prabhupada was not like any other guru, sadhu, all the people that are out there today talking about Prabhupada was, it was like he was showing up with guns blazing. Guns blazing. He put everybody on the hot seat, and we loved it. You know? He was like Muhammad Ali. For the next 20 years, I'll whip any man from any country, any time, any place. That's what Prabhupada was like. He was like, I'm from Goloka. I'm not from here. I'll take you all on, one at a time or all together at the same time. Let's go. You know? And all the devotees had that same, we got that from Prabhupada. As a matter of fact, Prabhupada formed the BBT in 72. The largest number of devotees to join the movement joined from the time the BBT was started till Prabhupada left the planet. I mean, there might have been 1,000 devotees up till then, and then suddenly, and most of us, myself included, or myself more than anyone, have no earthly idea how I went from where I was to how I became a devotee in the space of 3 months. I have no earthly idea how that happened. But I was a passionate athlete, smart enough and articulate enough that I could be a book distributor, but I have no idea how Krishna looked over and he said, "This guy, he's got all this energy. It will be completely squandered in the material world. Totally wasted. My pure devotee is over here, and he's got a serious task to do. So here's one of 1,000. I'm going to grab by the hair, pull them right out of their material world, whatever it is." So many book distributors were musicians, athletes, right? Or losers from the material perspective, right? And then suddenly just dragged by Krishna in and said, "Here, my pure devotee wants so desperately to accomplish all of this. Now you get the mercy here. You get the credit, you get the mercy, you get the fun, you get the joy, you get the excitement." It was exciting going on Sankirtan during that period, more than it's ever been since. You never knew what was going to happen. You never knew. It was always going to be someone would respond in an amazing way to the book itself. Someone would respond in a negative way, and then eventually later they'd get turned and become your friend. It was amazing. Miraculous things would happen. Miraculous. And we got to witness it. So how it happened, we have no idea. And actually, every book distributor that I know that went through that period of that 10, 12-year period intensely, they're all like veterans who are not damaged by the war. They're actually looking forward to the next war. You know, they would love to be engaged like that. So, you know, Prabhupada, he injected something very special. And he said in Washington, when Mother Meena said, Prabhupada, it seems so strange that you tell us women should be so chaste and shy and quiet and submissive. And Prabhupada, yes. What is the difficulty? And she said, well, that's not my question. My question is, you also send us out every day on Sankirtan. And we have to stop men in the street. We have to smile at them, and we have to speak nicely to them, and we have to talk to them, and then we convince them to give us money. I said, yes, what is the difficulty? And she said, well, it seems, you know, one is at odds with the other. And Prabhupada looked at her and he said, oh, she said, it seems that you're asking us in some situations to be aggressive when we're not really supposed to be aggressive. And Prabhupada said, he looks at her and he goes, I am also an aggressor. I came to this country, I was aggressive. I was very aggressive. You also can be aggressive. But then Prabhupada said, but you must learn how to be a lion in the chase and a lamb at home. So Prabhupada said, when you get home, then you can be a Mataji. He said, is that all right? And she's smiling from ear to ear. She knows, oh, this is ecstatic. I can go out every day and be an aggressor and stop people and, hey, you're not your body. Guess where you come from? Guess what? You're actually a rich man. You're a wealthy man. You just don't know it. You come from a very wealthy family. Take a look. And then come back to the temple and be just simple devotee. So Prabhupada was the powerhouse behind all of that. He was the powerhouse, and sometimes it was quietly injected, and sometimes it was really powerfully injected. And everyone felt it, you know. Jai Anilo Premadana Karuna Prachu.
Hare Krishna. So we're going to have Artik now. It's already 6:30. Stand up. Except me, you can stand up. Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Consciousness Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Consciousness Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi. Oh